When most people think of Italian America, they think of Mulberry Street. Checkered tablecloths, cannoli behind glass, and red sauce simmering in kitchens that have not changed in 60 years. But by 2010, not a single resident of Little Italy had actually been born in Italy. The most famous Italian neighborhood in America was already gone. Across the country, the neighborhoods that Italian immigrants built are vanishing. These are 10 disappearing Little Italys across America, and most of the world has no idea. Now, let us begin. Murray Hill in Cleveland, Ohio sits on a hillside tucked beside Case Western Reserve University. Italian immigrants from the Abruzzi and Campania regions settled here in the late 1800s to work in quarries and construction. They built Holy Rosary Church in 1892. They opened butcher shops and bakeries along Mayfield Road. They started the Feast of the Assumption, a street festival that has run every August for over 100 years and still draws thousands from across the Midwest. Today, Cleveland's Little Italy still has a heartbeat. The Italian American Museum sits at its center. Boutique shops and galleries line the streets, but the old Italian families have thinned. Young professionals and university students now fill the apartments. The grandchildren still come back every August for the feast. They carry the saint through the streets, but they drive in from the suburbs. They do not live here anymore. A neighborhood where the festival still runs, but the families have scattered. That is the early stage of a familiar pattern. Number 9. Federal Hill sits on the west side of Providence, Rhode Island. Marco Lee Mandry, chief executive of the Little Italy Association of San Diego, once said there are probably 3 vibrant Little Italys left in the entire country. He named San Diego, Boston's North End, and Providence. You enter Federal Hill beneath a giant arch topped with LA Pigna, a bronze pine cone, the Italian symbol of abundance. De Pasquale Square hosts outdoor dining in summer. Salumerias, bakeries, and trattorias still line Atwell's Avenue. Venda Ravioli has been a landmark for decades, but the Italian residential population has been drifting outward for years. Younger renters with no connection to Italy have taken their place. The restaurants endure. But the families who once lived above the shops, who hung laundry from the fire escapes and called to their children from the windows, they have gone. One of the last 3 standing in America. That alone tells you how rare this has become. Number 8. Baltimore's Little Italy sits in a tight grid of just 6 blocks by the Inner Harbor. Nancy Pelosi grew up on these streets. Her father, Thomas D'Alessandro Jr., served as mayor. By 1920, the neighborhood was 100% Italian, but assimilation did what no outside force could. St. Leo's School, which had educated 5 generations of children here, closed in 1980 because there were not enough young families left. Scott Punien, who opened Amici's in 1991, watched the neighborhood empty around him. Ciao Bella's closed. Rocco's closed. Caesar's Den closed. Damimo closed. When he arrived, there were 22 restaurants on those 6 blocks. Today, there are 606 residents. The median age is 33. Most are young renters with no Italian connection. The very success of assimilation, exactly what every Italian parent wanted for their children, emptied the neighborhood. They succeeded themselves out of existence. Number 7. The North End of Boston is a 1 square mile waterfront community within walking distance of the financial district. Over 100 Italian restaurants, bakeries, and cafes still line Hanover and Salem streets. The smell of fresh bread and espresso drifts out of doorways that have not changed in decades. Tourists queue for cannoli at Mike's Pastry. In 1930, the Italian population reached its peak. 44,000 people, 99.9% of the neighborhood. It was more densely populated than Calcutta. The North End had 28 Italian physicians, 6 dentists, 8 funeral homes, and along 1 block of Hanover Street, 4 or 5 barbershops. Today, the Italian-American population is roughly 3%. Property values have skyrocketed. The families who built this neighborhood could no longer afford to stay. They moved to Quincy, to Dedham, to the northern suburbs. The chefs may commute in, but they no longer live above the shop. 100 restaurants, 3% Italian. The food is still there. The people are gone. Number 6. North Beach sits at the base of Telegraph Hill in San Francisco. Between the wars, over 60,000 residents claimed Italian ancestry. 5 Italian-language newspapers circulated weekly. Amedeo Peter Giannini, son of immigrants from Liguria, founded what would become the Bank of America. Here, the first bank to lend money to immigrants and working families. Italian fishermen launched boats from the nearby wharves. Families pressed wine in their basements. The neighborhood was a living piece of the old country transplanted onto the California coast. After the Second World War, Italian families began moving to the suburbs, to Burlingame, San Mateo, and Napa. During the 1950s, the cafes of North Beach became gathering places of the Beat generation. Ginsberg, Kerouac, Ferlinghetti. The Italians moved out, the writers moved in. Since the 1980s, Chinatown has expanded north, and technology wealth has pushed prices beyond anything an ordinary family could afford. The neighborhood where the founder of Bank of America first loaned money to Italian fishermen is now a place where those same families could not afford to rent a room. Number 5. The Italian market stretches along 9th Street in South Philadelphia. You may know it from one image. A man in a gray tracksuit running past the stalls in the cold while a vendor tosses him an orange. Rocky Balboa. That scene was filmed right here. By 1902, more than 70,000 Italian immigrants lived in the surrounding Bella Vista district, just a short walk from the Washington Avenue immigration station. The market was the center of everything. Butchers, fishmongers, cheese merchants, all Italian, all shouting across the stalls in dialect. Today, the market still operates. The awnings still hang, but it is now mostly Asian and Latino vendors who run the stalls. Locals call the southern end Puebladelphia, a nod to the Mexican community from Puebla that has revitalized the strip. From 2000 to 2013, immigrants started 96% of newly opened storefront businesses in Philadelphia's commercial corridors. The market survived. But what it survived into is something its founders would not recognize. The name remains. The Italians do not. Number 4. Between 1880 and 1924, approximately 4 million Italians immigrated to the United States. A vast number poured into Lower Manhattan. By 1910, Little Italy held almost 10,000 Italians in the 14th Ward. Over 90% were of Italian birth or origin. The neighborhood stretched across 50 blocks. Mulberry Street was the spine. Today, Little Italy covers just 3 blocks of Mulberry Street between Canal and Broome. Italian Americans have shrunk to about 5%. In 2010, not a single resident had been born in Italy. Umberto's Clam House is fighting to survive. The building was purchased for $17.5 million. The rent is now $34,000 a month, double what it was. A shopkeeper once told a reporter that tourists walk in and ask where Little Italy is. He tells them they are already standing in it, from 50 blocks to 3. The most famous Little Italy in America is already gone. But in Chicago, the Italians did not simply drift away. Their neighborhood was taken from them. Number 3. At its peak, the neighborhood around Taylor Street on Chicago's near west side housed 25,000 Italians. Streets packed with grocers, bakers, barbers, and churches. On Saturday nights, a shopkeeper would put her jukebox on the pavement and people would dance. Families from Naples on one block, families from Sicily on the next, a city within a city. Then in the 1950s, the Eisenhower Expressway was driven straight through the heart of it. Entire blocks were demolished. Then came a second blow. Mayor Richard J. Daley chose this neighborhood for the new University of Illinois at Chicago campus. 800 homes and 200 businesses were bulldozed. 5,000 residents were displaced. Eminent domain was used to speed the demolition. Florence Scala, the community's most famous activist, fought to save the neighborhood. She took the case all the way to the Supreme Court. She lost. Many said Daley wanted the neighborhood decimated because it had taken on too much political power. Whether revenge or urban planning, the result was the same. 25,000 people and their world were paved over for a car park and a lecture hall. Number 2. Most people assume Mulberry Street was the largest Italian neighborhood in New York. It was not. That was East Harlem. By the 1930s, over 100,000 Italian Americans lived north of 96th Street. The 1930 census showed 81% were first or second generation Italian Americans. Each cross street belonged to a different region of Italy. Neapolitans on one block, Sicilians on the next, Calabrians around the corner. East Harlem was the first part of the city known as Little Italy, long before Mulberry Street claimed the name. After the war, Italian Americans moved outward, to the North Bronx, to Queens, to Brooklyn's southern tier. Puerto Rican and Latino families moved in. The transition was swift and total. Within a single generation, the neighborhood became El Barrio, Spanish Harlem. The Italian presence was entirely erased from its identity. 100,000 people. The first Little Italy in New York. Erased so completely the city has forgotten it was ever there. The streets remain. The names have changed. The memory is gone. Number 1. Los Angeles is home to the 5th largest Italian population in the United States, yet it has no identifiable Little Italy. The Italian population rose steadily in the early 20th century. There were 2,000 people in 1900 and 12,700 by 1930. They settled around the Plaza District in what is now Chinatown. The Italian Hall was built in 1908 on North Main Street. It was a 2-story yellow brick building with the words Italian Hall in gold lettering across the front. It hosted weddings, dances, banquets, and community meetings. 5 wineries operated within walking distance. Italian newspapers circulated weekly. Then, the Second World War changed everything. Some immigrants were displaced. Others were interned in relocation camps. Many faced open hostility because their homeland had become an enemy nation. After the war, freeways and government buildings were constructed on top of the old streets. Parking lots replaced the homes. The neighborhood did not decline slowly. It was demolished. Author Marianna Gatto, who spent years researching this vanished community, described tracing the history of Italians in Los Angeles as chasing ghosts. She said the community was near extinction because none of it had been properly documented. The Italian-American Museum of Los Angeles opened in 2016 inside the restored Italian Hall. The building had stood empty for over 65 years. It sits on North Main Street, a few steps from Olvera Street, surrounded by a city that long ago forgot it was there. It is the oldest surviving structure from a Little Italy most people have never heard of. A door closed for 65 years is now open again, waiting to see if anyone remembers.